R, data are stored in what are known as objects. Each object has a name, contents, and a class. The class of the object tells us what kind of thing it is, such as something like an integer. So, as a quick thing, I read in a file called births and labeled it births, so we can see that we already have this. I am going to give this command summary underscore weight. So this is going to be the name of my variable. So I'm going to give a summary of the weight variable in my data set. I'm going to use my summary command. My data set is called births, and then $, and I'm going to do birth weight. If I run this, I can see that my summary is saved. So I have the summary weight value in my environment window. And if I type the command summary underscore weight and click run, I can see the list, my summary list, the minimum, first quartile, median, mean, third quartile, and maximum. So the median is the third thing in this long list, and I can save that using this summary. So I'm going to do my median weight. And for that, I'm going to use summary weight, which is the variable that has the full summary. And then I'm going to use square brackets and do a 3 because it is the third thing in the list. If I click run, I have that variable saved. And if I try to display it by listing its name, I can see that the median is in fact 3,300. And so I took it from a list and pulled it into a single value using these square brackets. I can use this idea to find things like the interquartile range, cutoff values, and outliers. So I'm going to do another variable that I'm going to call Q1 weight to give me the first quartile of the weight. So I'm going to use my summary weight command. And if I look at my list, the first quartile is the second in this list. So I'll have 2. I can run that. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the third quartile. Q3 weight and then summary underscore weight. And the third quartile is the fifth variable in this list. It's the fifth thing in the list. So 5. I can run that, and now I have Q3 saved as well. So to find the interquartile range, I'm going to do IQR weight. That's what I'm going to call this variable. I can do Q3 weight minus Q1 weight. Now that I have them saved individually rather than in a list, I can perform these kind of calculations. I run it, I can see in my list that I have the value of 800, or I can display it by just typing in the variable name. I can see it's 800. When I'm looking for cutoff values for outliers, I'm going to call this lower. And how I do this is I do Q1 weight. In general, I do the first quartile, and I subtract 1.5 times my IQR. I can run this, and then I'm going to do a similar one for my upper. Upper is equal to Q3 weight plus 1.5 times IQR. And these are the basic formulas for finding those cutoff values for outliers. So I now have those cutoff values. They're over here in my list of variables, but they're also saved for me to use later. I now want to look at finding the outliers, using this to actually get R to list the outliers for me. So I'm going to create a variable called outweight, and this is going to be my list of outliers. As of right now, I don't know any, so I'm going to create a blank list and run that. The next thing I'm going to do is set this variable I. In row tells me the number of rows in my births file. So births has a lot of data values, and in row is going to tell me the number of rows in that data set. So now I'm going to do what's called a while loop. So while I is greater than 0. So basically this says as long as I is a positive number, I'm going to do this loop. So I'll perform this loop because right now if I check in my environment window, I is 400. So I'm going to do this because I is 400. I'll run this loop. At the end, I'll change I and I'll retest. Is I still positive? Is it still above 0? Yes, then this loop will happen again. And I'm going to use curly braces to put stuff inside this loop to tell it what to do as long as that variable is positive. I'm going to use an if command. So if just tells me if something's true, this is what we're going to do. So if my births $, birth weight, my variable in the ith row. So that I tells me which row I'm looking at. If that's less than my lower value, then that is going to be an outlier. So I'm going to say outweight is equal to C. I'm going to essentially what I'm telling this to do is say take the original list of my outliers and then just tack this variable, this new value, onto the end. And the I tells me that I'm looking at the ith row. It tells the dataset, or it tells R which row in the dataset I'm looking at. I'm then going to use this else if command. Basically, if that's not true, if my birth weight value in the particular row I'm looking at is not smaller than the lower value, we should check if it's bigger than the upper value. So very similarly, this time, birth weight of I, because I'm looking at the ith row, is greater than upper. Then I need to add it onto my list. So I'm going to take my list and I'm going to say, take the original list, don't change it, but then add on this new value. Finally, anytime we're dealing with a loop, we need to give it some kind of condition to change the value. So basically I'm going to do I equal to I minus 1. So as a quick note, I has the value of 400 because there are 400 rows in my data set. So it's going to look at row 400 and then I'm going to subtract 1 to get to row 399. This is going to run for row 399. I'm going to subtract 1 and it'll be 398. This is going to check row 398, subtract 1 to get to 397. Check row 397, etc. all the way until we get to row 1. We subtract 1, then I is equal to 0, and it'll get us out of this loop because we're done. So I'm going to highlight this because I need to run more than one line at a time. We highlight it and click Run, and it ran through my loop. Finally, I'm going to display my variable outweight. And if I run that, I can see my list of outliers down here at the bottom.